This computer. Okay. So welcome, Jessica, and thank you for coming along. I am going to do another intro because we are going to be starting in about 5 minutes, but I just wanted to get recording first, and because we've just had a whole 10-minute conversation of gold, which is really why I wanted you to come on, because I've had experience of you during the retreats that we've done, and you know, I just think those conversations about sex and relationships and love is just really important, you know, for everyone to sort of be engaging in having them conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're going to do the intro later. Do you want to just continue what we were talking about?
No, yeah, let's just continue what we're talking about.
Yeah. So, you know, I was saying to Liz that my theory on women and sex, right, is that we should absolutely have all the sex we want. We should never be shamed for it. We should never feel shame for it. It's our divine right to the orgasm, right? Like, we should be able to sleep with who we want, when we want, first date, 10th date, whatever. Yeah. However, and my hard-won experience, and when I say my hard-won experience, is that I've explored all of that. And unfortunately, the way that we still socialize men and women, and when I say socialize, like the messaging we give them as we grow up about sex is very different. And, you know, so is, and as adults as well. I mean, if you look at just pornography and sex in movies, and, you know, no matter how X-rated or G-rated it is, it's a very different messaging we're giving men versus women still. And so my hard-won experience is that on one hand, like having sex with somebody really quickly, they did usually lose interest really quickly. You know, it became really obvious that there was, and it's not so much about them getting what they wanted and then leaving. But what I was saying is that one of the main ways that we socialize boys and men for their self-esteem is one, through achievement. Right? So sports is geared very much towards trophies and winning games. And not that women don't play sports, but and building things. We look at the toys we give little boys versus little girls. You know, we give them construction sets. So it's about achievement. It's about output. But the other main way that we socialize men, especially in the arena of sex, is about their sexual prowess. You know, women don't sit in the locker room and everybody takes their pants off and measure the size of their vulva. But that's not an uncommon thing, right? For young men, you know, there's a lot of talk about the size of it and this. And also the great example I always give is that if you think back, way back when we were in school, there was that girl, and you might've been that girl, and that's fine, who was like the first in their class to have sex. And when everybody found out about it, right? One time, this one girl has sex one time, slag. Slut, right? Like immediately that's the response. Now the guy she had sex with, who it wasn't his first time, she's her third or fourth partner, he's a stud.
Yeah.
So the messaging is so different. So right from a very early state, it's like, this is my output in this area is what is part of the way I validate myself and feel worthiness. And it's unconscious. So when men are able to achieve that sex so quickly, it gives them that sense of validation but it only lasts, equated to the length of time they had to wait for it is how long it'll last, if that makes sense.
Absolute sense. Yeah.
So it's, you know, and there's an old phrase, it might be very American and I hate it, but there's a phrase that says, nobody buys the cow when the milk is free. And again, the way that we kind of, going back to that slut slag girl and that stud, right? And, you know, baller, or whatever you want to call the guy of the same age who have sex, is that, you know, if you give it away too freely, then it's valued less. I don't think it should be that way. I wish a million times over it wasn't that way, but it is.
Yeah.
Now, the second thing about what's cool about that, right? Or where we can find a silver lining, if you will, as Liz and I were talking about, you know, that lead up to the first time you have sex with somebody, you know, the first kisses and the fooling around and the, you know, like there's something unique about the butterflies of that. right? The way your stomach flip-flops when they, their hand brushes that one spot, and the will we, won't we, and should I, shouldn't I? And, but that kind of, there's almost like a tantric, if you will, sensation of anticipation. And I learned that once you have sex with somebody, you can't recreate that same feeling.
No.
That same heightened level of like, your skin's tingling and, so why not like extend that as long as you can? Now, I'm not saying that having sex with somebody isn't great. And then, my experience is always the first time having sex with somebody, for the most part, isn't the greatest. You have to learn each other's bodies. So there is room for growth and improvement and wonderful things that happen down the road as you start to have sex with somebody more often. But that period can't be replicated. And so draw it out as long, enjoy it by waiting a little bit longer, and, keep the fooling around going a little bit longer before you actually, consummate with that act of having penetrative sex. It's how we kind of think of it, why not?
Absolutely. I happen to agree. And we're now going to go live, people. So let me just.
That was the pre-podcast chat.
I wish I'd recorded it from the get-go, to be fair, because it was absolute God. So we're going to go live onto Facebook now. So you're going to have to just bear with me because I don't want any feedback. So I'm going to just have to make sure. I've already done this beforehand.
I always find it a bit fiddly.
Yeah, and you know what? This is the first. I'm going to explain this when we go live. This is the first time that I've been on my own platform doing this. So in live stream now. You are live on Facebook. You just mute Facebook because it will get some feedback. Cool. So there is going to be a bit of a delay when it goes onto Facebook. It says that we are live. Let me just check via my phone that we are. So there was a little bit of a delay. Yeah, we're live on Facebook. So good morning to the lovely Jess and anybody that's watching live. I know some of you is going to be at work, but don't worry, you can catch us on the replay because it's going to stay on my page. And you can also get it on a variety of podcast platforms such as Spotify. Once I upload it later on today, it's not going to be instant because this is all new. And in terms of this being new, this is the first time I've had complete autonomy over the podcast. I'm streaming using my own platform for the help of one lovely, lovely Wendy. You know who you are, sending you lots of love. She'll probably cringe because I've shouted her out. It was being hosted by a platform called Crossroads Podcast UK. Amazing people, absolutely taught me so much, but it just felt right to sort of take some ownership of that. So I'm really blessed. I'm really happy that Jessica, the beautiful Jessica, I love, and relationship coach, has agreed to come and do the first show with me where it's all right. So good morning, Jess. How are you coping in this weather?
Good morning. I have a fan blowing directly on me. If I could have fans encircling me and one going up my dress, I would. It's the only way to go.
I've heard of people putting sanitary towels in the fridge freezer and then wearing them for their cooch. Don't know whether that's a thing.
Not heard of that. All I can say is British people, you could do that, or you could just, surrender to aircon. I'm just saying, as an American, the thing I miss most in this country is aircon. And I know it's terrible for the environment, and I apologize, and I will offset my carbon footprint somewhere else, but I cannot melt.
Yeah, no.
And I'm not going to put a sanitary pad in the freezer.
Well, I
love the ingenuity. It's quite innovative.
Well, I thought it was ingenious, but that's if you wear underwear. In this weather, underwear like a no-no. It's commando all the way. Like, as long as you've got a pair of shorts on, your cooch is okay. So that's my take on that. We were having a really interesting conversation, actually, weren't we, before we went live about dating. So you're going to feel like you're going to repeat yourself, but hey ho, it's all good. About dating and that, and sort of the realms of sex and where women are on that first sort of date sex and where men are? And I find it really interesting, your take on that.
Yeah. So, gosh, what were we saying? So we were talking about, sex, and I am very sex positive. And what that means is, especially for women, right? And for men, like, I believe that women, it's your divine right to the orgasm, and we were built in a way to be able to achieve that by whomever, I have no idea, but our design is, right, that we can achieve quite amazing orgasms and sex, and that we should be doing it. And we should be doing it. And hypothetically, I believe, right, you should have sex with whoever you want, whenever you want, first date, 10th date, 20th date, before a single date, I don't care. That's my belief. But my hard-won experience has been different. And so we were talking about, you're dating somebody and then you have sex with them once or twice, and all of a sudden they seem to lose interest, especially in heterosexual relationships, right, with men and women. And my experience, right, is that, and there's a really terrible American saying that I hate, but it seems to prove itself out, is that nobody buys the cow if the milk is free. And through my sexual revolution and exploration, time and time again, it was shown to me that if I had sex with somebody too quickly, it did seem to fizzle the connection and fizzle the relationship. And it's because of the way that we socialize men and women, and the way that we educate men and women around sex specifically, but around a lot of things, is very different. And by socialize and educate, I don't necessarily mean in school from a teacher, but the messaging that we get from as we're growing up, from our peers, from parents, from carers, from the media, from TV, later in life from pornography and movies and things like more adult movies and things like that, is that men are socialized to get their self-esteem from one of two areas. And one is achievement, and that's usually through work or sports and awards and building things. And the other is through sexual prowess. And I was saying to Liz, like, a couple examples of that is that one, women don't tend to have locker room meetups where we drop our pants and everybody measures their vulva and compares them. But not an uncommon thing in young boys' lives, right? Is this whole, comparison and how that makes you less or more of a man, or less or better than, or etc. In fact, we have the opposite experience where we hide that. And sometimes till we're way older in life. There's women who go into changing rooms and sneak into the stalls to change because the idea of even getting naked in front of other women, that they might catch a glimpse, right? Very different messaging about those specific areas, the genitalia in our lives. And also the other example is that classic, the girl in school. She was the first one in our class to have sex. She had sex once. She lost her virginity, right? Whatever that means. And she's immediately branded a slut, a slag, and any other derogatory term, and shamed. And the guy she had sex with, who maybe it wasn't even his first time, this is his third or fourth girl that he's been with, he's the stud. He's celebrated. And so that kind of carries over into life, into adult life, into our adult sexual relationships. And now, forget about if you add any type of transactional sex experience, sex work experience, abusive sex experience, childhood sexual abuse. Add any of that into that already kind of murky waters. And it can be a real recipe for disastrous and healthy and free, thriving sexual relationships. So my hard-won experience is to wait. And there's no magic number. There's all these theories of like date 5 or date 4 or date 8 or date 12, or there's no magic number. It has to feel right for you. But there also is, and what I was talking about was that period when you're leading up to having sex with someone, and that anticipation and the level of butterflies, the flip-flops of the stomach when you're kissing them for the first time, or you're fooling around for the first, will we, won't we, like all of that creates such a frenetic, intense anticipation type energy that goes once we have sex with someone.
Mm.
you never get back that same feeling. So I say the plus of waiting is also extending that sensation that is quite amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can't really replicate that same anticipation feeling of that leading up to the first time you have sex with somebody. So the plus is by waiting, you also get to enjoy that period for longer.
Mm.
So yeah, that's the
That was the catch of what we were talking about, wasn't it? Yeah. I mean, do you feel that online dating has kind of stumped some of that, that foreplay? Because a lot of that, like the sex texting kind of happens, and then that actual physical foreplay. And do you think that's been stunted, or?
Yeah, I don't know if it's stunted. I mean, when I coach women who are out in the wilds of modern dating, I have a tendency to, well, I don't have a tendency, I'm a love coach. So I'm really interested in people who are either in loving relationships and want to make their relationships better or get the relationship out of crisis, or I work with men and women who are single but are looking for serious relationships. And the reality is that the sexting, right, isn't something that I would necessarily recommend, because you're already, before you even met this person in real life, you're already drawing a direct line to what's going to happen next.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really setting it up for a relationship. It's setting it up to meet and have sex, whether that be the first time you meet up or the third time you meet up. You've kind of, that intention is set the moment you start sexting. But that being said, right, sexting, I don't know if it stunts it, but you could actually elongate it as well, because sexting is part of that foreplay.
Yeah.
So there's that anticipation of the sexting, right? And then you're going to actually meet this person for the first time. And then, that doesn't mean just because you've done that sexting that is the foreplay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, there can be a still more progression of foreplay once you physically meet before you actually have penetrative sex with somebody.
Interesting. I mean, especially in terms of, like coaching women and men that are, looking for, because that's kind of the place I'm at. I'm not openly seeking, but that, how do you date? Where do you find people of a like-minded, I didn't know where I was going to go with that then, but like-minded, who are looking for a companion. I'm not looking for a baby daddy. My child's got a father. I'm not looking for someone to pay my mortgage. I'm quite all right, but I just want someone I can enjoy time with, that gets me. Where do we find them people? Especially, like everybody on here knows my background. With my background, when's it the appropriate time to say, you need to know about my past because it's really quite dark? Like where do we find these people? What do we do?
Well, where do I find is like the most question I get asked the most, right? And it's like I may have this secret dating app that nobody knows about. Like, oh, you want high achieving, successful, independent men or women. Oh, this is this one app that you've never heard of. That's where they all are at. It doesn't work like that. But a lot of it is about how you show up in those spaces.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've coached people that have found long-term, meaningful, beautiful relationships on everything from Tinder to eHarmony and all of the many, 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 many online dating options in between that, because that's kind of the two extremes, right? Like you have eHarmony, which is like, this is the site you find somebody to get married to. And you have Tinder, which for many years and still can be quite a hookup site, right? It's about how you show up in that space. So some of the first things I do with the people that I coach that are dating is get really clear on what it is that they want.
Right.
Because we all kind of have this list and we don't realize how much we don't know what that list really means or what it looks like or what it sounds like. And what I mean by that is almost everybody says like, oh, what are you looking for? Oh, somebody that has a good sense of humor, we can have a laugh. That's probably in the top 10, right? Somebody that has their own thing going on, and so I can have my own thing going on. Somebody that's really kind. And we use these words. And one of the first things I do when they give me all these words is that we go back and I ask them to define what each one of these words means to them. Because here's the thing, right? Somebody who's funny has a good sense of humor. Okay? So if I think dry, witty, British humor is funny, and you think slapstick, maybe really dirty stuff is funny, we both have a good sense of humor, but we don't have the same sense of humor.
Yeah.
You know
Yes.
what I mean? So it's like what I might consider, like, how do I know when somebody's kind? Like, what do kind people do? And that's what I say to them, like, first define the word. And then if somebody, right, had your same sense of humor, what comedians would they be into? What TV shows would be into? Because that's when you're looking at all these profiles, or you're sending those first messages, or you're writing your own profile. This is the stuff that you want to highlight. So an example of that is like if you looked at somebody's profile and they said, my favorite comedian is Michael McIntyre, and blah, 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 blah. If you're somebody that also really loves Michael McIntyre's humor, you kind of already know that you have the same sense of humor.
Yeah.
Other people might be like, that is the least thing that I find funny in the world, which is fair. But that means that we're not necessarily going to have the same sense of humor.
No.
I'm focusing on that. We don't have to live and die by whether we have the same sense of humor, but just as an example. So getting really clear on what they're looking for and making sure that they're showing up on these dating profiles very authentically, but also really specific. Because if you put out this really general, I'm looking for companionship. I know, but it's like, so what does companionship look like to you? Because it's going to be defined differently by somebody else. So it's like, instead of saying I'm just looking for companionship, my ideal partner is someone that we get together on the weekends and we go out bowling and then go out for some drinks, or we go out to the farmer's market first thing in the morning and have a nice brunch after. Like, that's what I'm looking for in companionship. Somebody to travel with. Now, again, big thing on everybody's list. Oh, I want somebody who wants to travel. And if your idea of travel is going to Benidorm for a week, right? And sitting by the pool and that's it, right? With a book in front of the pool in Benidorm, beautiful. Not my idea of travel,
Exactly.
right? And somebody else's idea of travel is hiking the Tibetan mountains and camping. Not my idea of travel, but God bless you. So it's, again, we want to be more specific so that we're calling in and attracting a more specific person.
And it's being defined on what it is you want, because I said all them words you said, I was thinking all that, someone who's kind, someone who's honest, I want a companion. But actually, when you were speaking, I was sitting there thinking, actually, well, what does that mean to me? What does that look like? What's the level of contact? And I suppose it's really about figuring out what that person wants as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, like, what does it look like and sound like? People that, because unfortunately, online dating, and especially those first dates, can feel very much like an interview, right? Like we're being interrogated, or we have to interrogate. So like another big thing is people say, I want somebody whose family is really important to them. So instead of showing up and either messaging or showing up to a coffee date and saying, is family important to you? What's your favorite comedian? Where does he like to travel? Right? Is like allowing that to come out in conversation. So somebody who really values family, right, will be saying things like, oh, sorry, I can't meet up on Sunday because, every Sunday we do a roast at my mom's. Or, hey, what was Christmas like for you? And Christmas is always, all the family comes around from all over the country. It's, it's totally crazy, but it's a big laugh. And we, that's what somebody whose family is very important to them. Or they say things like, I'm not going to be able to meet up because my son has a game, and I always show up for his games.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of stuff. Versus, so you don't necessarily have to go into full interrogation mode, but to kind of allow people to reveal themselves, but know what you're looking and listening for.
Yeah, that's interesting, actually. That's really interesting. And so in terms of overexposure, how much do you sort of reveal on a first date is the other real question.
Very little.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people, especially people in recovery, right? Because especially if you're in a 12-step or similar kind of fellowship-based, right? We have a lifestyle of absolute honesty, transparency, and vulnerability. Like, we walk into a room of strangers, raise our hand, and go blah 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 blah, right? Like, and that's necessary in that arena. but it's a very specific arena.
Yes.
You know, and so in the same token, you typically wouldn't go into most job interviews and say, you really need to know about my past because it's kind of dark.
I like how you said that then, most job interviews, and I suppose a first date is exactly that, isn't it? It's that, will we, won't we, are we, do we like each other, what's going on?
You know what I always tell people, like the only question that you're really trying to answer on a first date is, do I want to see this person again?
See, now that is
not, are they the one, right?
Yeah. How much do I tell them? Because I was on a first date recently, and this guy, lovely guy, it's not going anywhere. And, you know, I said, my past is quite dark, and it ended up coming out. And what I actually think come off the back end of that was his expectation of what was then going to happen. Without revealing too much, so I can't be asked today, but and that was a real eye opener for me in terms of, okay, he was really transparent, I was really transparent, but then he had an idea of who I was going to be. Like there was an absolute second date, which there wasn't. I was very honest with him. So yeah, that's really interesting. Just sort of the first dates about.
Well, one of the retreats that we did, the Phoenix Rising retreats we did, was around shame and sex, and a lot of the work that I did that is directly inspired by Brene Brown's work, who does a lot of work around vulnerability and shame and intimacy. And that kind of like, I need to disclose right away is kind of what she would describe as the shock and awe, right? Or the smash and grab. And what it means is like in a smash and grab burglary, right? You run up to the window, smash the window, grab it and run, right? Or you come in and I like to call it the flasher, right? The person that comes in with a trench coat and flashes, right? That type of behavior is actually really repellent.
Yeah.
Because it is too much. And we don't realize that one of the main, we think that we're being honest, and there's that part of us that's telling us that, but deep down inside, most likely what's happening is there's still that absolute shame around it. And it's a way of actually keeping somebody at a distance and avoiding intimacy. Because we say, well, if you can't handle this,
you can't handle me.
Right.
Yeah.
And the reality is like that's immediately putting up some walls up, right? Like here's the hoops that you got to go through.
Yeah, and a back door.
And if you don't get scared and run away, then maybe
you'll
love. And what it comes out is we say to ourselves, then maybe you're worth it. But really what we're saying is, if you don't get scared away by this, then maybe I might just be lovable, even though all these things happen to me.
Yes, absolutely.
And so there's this part of us that's trying to recreate the rejection. Right? Because again, disclosing too much, and we've all been there. Like you go up and maybe you meet somebody at a meeting or that coworker, right? That you meet, and all immediately they're like, what, and they're telling you all this personal stuff. And tell me that you don't take a step backwards.
No, yeah.
Right? Like because you're already like, well, this is a bit much. It's a bit messy. Like I don't even know you yet, right? Like. Especially, it's kind of like, whoa, because it is naturally kind of repellent when people overshare and overexpose and disclose too quickly, because it's trying to short circuit intimacy, and intimacy doesn't work that way.
No.
So what we're doing is like, 9 out of 10 times people are going to take a step back from us because that's the natural response to it. But we see it as a further confirmation of why we're not lovable.
No, seeking the evidence. Say, told you exactly. Yep. Yeah. Isn't it intriguing how our behaviours can be actually the opposite of what we think our intention is? It's a minefield.
It is. It can be. So yeah, I mean, your original question is like, how much do you tell? Like it's. I mean, and this is so for me, and my story is right. Like I like to always say, I'm a recovering love life train wreck. Choo choo, hot mess express coming to a train station near you. Like I don't come to this from a place of like, I've always been absolutely just totally zen at relationships, like not at all. And dating was as much a process of self-discovery, regardless of what it shit show. I mean, the things I got myself in and out of while I was dating, it's just, I mean, I should have written a book. It's hilarious and horrific at the same time. It's like a horror movie that you can't help but laugh at. But at the same token, I learned so much. I didn't know how to date.
Yeah.
I knew either how to sleep with somebody right away, or I knew how to be, I was the second date relationship girl, right? Like I either serial monogamous or just sex. Like there was no in between.
Yeah.
And I needed to learn how to date. I needed to learn how to like discover what somebody's favorite color was, what they like to do for fun, you know, what type of humor that they had, who their favorite sports team was, or what kind of music did they like to listen to. I didn't know how to do any of that until like I was already 6 months into a relationship and being
Yeah.
like, who are you and how did I get into this? And we have nothing in common.
And dating, that whole concept of dating, I mean, I know I'm not that I've dated in America, but I know the two are really different. Like you can go on many dates, whereas out here, it's like you go on a date and you're seeing each other. Like
Yeah.
this one date thing, because I'm really up for, I want to just go on a lot of dates because I ain't got a clue what I want really. You know, like I want a companion, I want someone kind, I want someone funny, like something to chill with at the weekend. But you're right, I have no, so is it okay to just go on an abundance of dates?
Sure. Why not? And I often, you know, there's, especially if people are more high anxiety daters. And what I mean by that is they have more of an anxious attachment, right? Like they meet somebody and they have like one really good date and they're like, that's it. I don't want to see anybody else. Like this could be it. This is the one. Like people that have that kind of language that are like that heat seeking missile, right? I strongly recommend them to date multiple people at the same time, not for months on end or anything.
No.
But it's like, yeah, you can go out and you can be online, right? You could be chatting to a few people. You can go on a date with somebody on Thursday, and you can go on another date with a different person on Saturday, and another first date with somebody on Sunday. And then, you know, and then from that pool of people, right? Like somebody's going to drop out, whether because you don't want to see them again or they don't want to see you again.
Yeah.
But what happens when we spread our focus, right, is two things. One, we don't hyper focus in and be like, great, this is it. You know, like this has got potential. This could be the thing. This could be the one. This is right. And then when it doesn't work out, right, that rejection, right, even if we didn't like them, the disappointment of being like, oh, I really thought this time,
yeah,
right, is so much greater because we were so focused on, you know, only having one egg in the basket. But if we have a few eggs in the basket and somebody ghosts and the other person after a second date, we're like, nah, they don't have that same level of devastation or disappointment or rejection because you're like, okay, well, I still have a couple more dates to go on. And it helps to kind of calm that anxiety actually down.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Make perfect sense, yeah.
You know, while somebody who's more avoidant, right, like we need to be careful because the avoidance always kind of, well, there could be something better out there. Is a classic way of keeping everybody at an arm's distance. So a different kind of technique for that. But, you know, absolutely go on lots of dates, figure out what you like and you don't like. Like I said, it was more of a process of self-discovery. I learned so much I learned on each date, I probably learned so much more about myself than I did about the person across the table.
Really? That's really yeah, right.
You know, because I had no idea what I wanted, what I liked, what I didn't like, you know, like what was important, what wasn't important. And even then, sometimes you think, okay, this is what's important. And it can, you know, there's always needs to be some flexibility without compromising too far.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, I mean, that's a big one, isn't it? That you kind of figure out what you want, but it can't be so rigid that, you know, I'll tick you off a list, tick you off a list. There has to be some sort of compromise when you meet somebody, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, you know, it's interesting. So like I often tell this story. So my husband, right, I've been married now been together for 13 years and married for 10. The day I met him, so we met online. Yeah. But the day we actually first met, and I always encourage people to take the word first date off the table. I always call it a first meet or a drive-by. Yeah. Right. And so I tell people the first time, especially if you're online dating, right, is you just meet for a cup of coffee or a walk in the park or an ice cream, like 30 minutes, something that's set up to be really casual and very short. And so we did that, right? Now that day that we met for that cup of coffee, I was on my way back uptown. I was living in New York City at the time from a lunch date, right? Like a proper first date with someone. It was on lunch. Met my husband, Mark, for coffee. And then later that night was meeting somebody else that wasn't serious at all. Yeah. And again, I think it's that socialization that women think, well, if I'm really serious about this, I can't be having sex with people, or I can't be doing anything that's not serious, right? Like, or I can't be dating multiple people if I'm going to be, and it's just not true. You know, I met him for a cup of coffee, and it wasn't like I walked in and was like, oh my God.
Love at first sight.
Love at first sight.
Cupid's
Right? Like, it was more about, and the moment, it was more about saying, there's something really interesting here. I don't know exactly what it is yet, but I want to find out.
Yeah.
And on that date, as we sat chatting, the moment for me was in the coffee houses, they have this little communal water jug, and he's going up to get himself some water. And he asked me, would you like to get some water? And I said, yeah, absolutely. That would be lovely. Right. He gets a little gold star, right? Thoughtful, considerate. Yeah. But that wasn't it. I'm watching him go over to this water jug. And he was so nervous that it was jiggling. And he was spilling water all over the place, right? And then he looked back at me and he saw me watching him and he said, you didn't see that. I said, I saw nothing. But there was this little snapshot of something really vulnerable and beautiful that really piqued my interest, especially in the world of dating where everybody's trying to put on a show. Yeah, right. Like, we all send the representative, don't get me wrong.
The representative is a much better version than me.
Yeah, you know, like, but there's always this game of stuff. And there was something so genuine about that. Yeah. And, you know, listen, a week later, we were out for a proper dinner. We had a great time. We, you know, wandered the streets afterwards for hours talking. And here's a really funny, that first date, right? So gets to the end of the date, right? And I'm like, here comes the hot makeout session is what I'm thinking. Because again, mom's still kind of really screwy with what is and is not dating. So like for me, I think a really good first date ends with a really hot makeout session on somebody's front porch that I don't live on, you know, like just randomly on the streets of New York City. I don't. And he literally gave me this quick peck. I think it was on the cheek, and ran.
Oh, bless it.
And I remember calling like my mentor at the time and being like, I don't know what just happened. I thought we had a really great time. And she said, you know, Jessica, not everybody's idea of how a really great first date ends is with this really hot makeout session randomly on the streets of New York City.
Yeah.
And so I was still learning, you know, even on that first date with the guy who, you know, wound up being my husband, of like, oh, okay. So that's not what it has to be in order for it to this overly sexualized version of connection. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you just hit the word that, you know, now in the head, the connection.
Yeah. That
connection and that energy that you can have with one person, you're not necessarily going to have with somebody else. And it's about them, that connection and energy matching.
Yeah.
Tricky though, isn't it?
Yeah. And listen, I'm, you know, big in the monogamy game. But I don't believe in the one. In fact, that's the first thing I ask clients to ban from their language. Like, because that's just all scarcity mentality.
Yeah.
There's not enough, right? Like, there's not enough time in the day. There's not enough money in the world. There's not enough this and enough. And now you're trying to tell me that out of the billions of people on this planet, I only get one? What if I already met them and I didn't realize it? What if they're living in a different country? What if we were getting on the wrong train in different cars? Like, I'm already hyperventilating thinking about that. So like, I believe in soulmates, plural, but I don't believe that you only get one opportunity with one person to experience unbelievable, wonderful, heart-wrenching love.
No, I think, yeah. And I like that, you know, because I've been asked a question, have you been in love before? And the instant answer, you want to go, no, but actually that's not necessarily the truth. You know, there's been connections with other human beings. It doesn't mean that they're my person right now, you know, and I'm always saying, but, you know, wanting to find my person, but that, you're right, that's really limiting.
Yeah. You know, and my husband is, you know, the great love of my life. Have I been in love before? Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I look back, especially when I was really young, like it's almost laughable, right? What I considered love, but it was real then. It was all I knew of what love was at that time. So absolutely. I was in love with that first person. I was in love with, the guy I lived with for many years. Absolutely.
See, I really like that, because I've really sort of, stunted that and been like, no, never felt it before. But actually, if I was to take myself back, okay, it might not have been love, but it felt real then. And there was something going on in my body then with that person.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Something in your heart, in your spirit, in your loins, wherever, like, there's that connection. And so I had all that with those people, who I was at the time, and my ability to actually participate in a truly loving, healthy, thriving relationships was not very much, but it was the best I could do at that time. And so it was absolutely.
And getting the two confused as well, like a connection and having feelings for someone, or having a connection and a feeling with someone, like the two becoming really entwined and really difficult to distinguish. Okay, what is this, a heart moment, or what is this, a lust moment? Which two are they?
Listen, the sexual chemistry is something in of itself, and I think also that word chemistry is really overused in the realms of love and dating and all that stuff. And part of what I think is kind of really wrong with dating is that we don't understand that the spark and chemistry are two different things. So by definition, chemistry is the combination of various elements, and then adding to that a catalyst, which creates something new. So that's what chemistry actually is. The catalyst is the spark. So if you just have the spark, you don't have chemistry. If you just have all those elements, but you don't have that catalyst or that spark, you don't have chemistry. So everybody's but they're so focused on the spark. Like, I went to this date and I just didn't feel the spark. Yeah. And, sometimes that spark can be only sexual, right? Like, we can have really great sexual compatibility with somebody, but no compatibility or chemistry in other areas of our lives. And, I always say you also have to look at those little old couples, right? Like, the little old couple that's walking hand in hand or sitting on the bench together, all the years later, I'm going to put money on it's not the great sexual chemistry that's still keeping them holding hands.
Yeah.
It's about a life shared. It's about common interest and common hobbies, but also their own individual relationships and their own individual hobbies. There has to be more than just a great time in bed.
No, and I don't suppose that leads quite nice on to what would you say is a good recipe for longevity in a relationship? Because we've all been there and it's got stale. I mean, I'm recently divorced, God bless him, and I'm not going to go into that, but how do you build that longevity? What do you do to, the 7-year itch? How do you maintain, when you love this person and it goes a bit stale, goes a bit.
Yeah. So for me, one of the things that, especially clients that come to me, couples, is very much, I hear a lot of phrases like, I don't know if I love this person. I don't know if I'm in love with this person anymore, or I don't know if I love them anymore, or has the love died? And again, we focus on love, 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 love. And I'm a love coach, so, I'm guilty of overusage of that word, if you will. But the reality is that you can't put the cart before the horse. And what I mean by that is that the cart is love. Right. So in that cart that we call love, right, we pile things like children and houses and holidays and businesses and all kinds of stuff, right? Like a life lived. But what pulls that cart, what actually pulls it through, especially the hard times, the life on life times, COVID, being locked up in a house 24/7, 365, 7 days a week, like I have been with my husband, who's still working from home, so, right? Who I love dearly, but I wish we get that out of my house, right? Like that kind of stuff, loss, grief. What pulls that cart through is the horse, and the horse's connection. Right. So if we focus on connection, what connects us, what feeds our connection, then we can get through anything, and that longevity and that 7-year itch and all of it. But the moment we start to disconnect, the love starts to die, it starts to wither, the cart stops moving. Yeah. And so when people talk about like what gives me longevity, and I always focus on connection, respect. And respect means like respect for myself, respect for my partner. And there's a level of not like just, oh, I'm not disrespectful, but also pride. I'm proud to have that person as my partner. I'm proud to be the woman that I am. I'm proud, right? Like trust. Because all in all, especially long-term relationships, committed, and the word committed is right there, commitment. It's about safety.
Yeah.
It's about knowing I'm safe with this human being, physically, but also emotionally, mentally, financially.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I can let my when I'm with this one person, my shoulders drop from my ears, right?
Yeah.
And the stresses of the day, right? And it's not because we never argue, we don't have little bitter, bickering and stuff, but because I can trust them. But I
Yeah.
also trust myself. And so
Yeah.
when I work with couples, I work with their dynamic, but I also really work with the relationship they have with themselves as individuals as well.
Which is hugely important, isn't it? Because you're bringing that into a relationship.
You want a healthy relationship, you need two healthy participants in that relationship. Who both have a good elevated level of self-esteem and self-worth, who feel confident in themselves, in expressing and communicating, right? And have respect for themselves as well as their partner.
Yeah.
And that connection, is really feeding that. And that leads to the intimacy and everything else. And, one of the things that I love to use when we did a retreat on intimacy, and the thing I sent the attendees, I paired, they all went away in pairs, and we did something called the intimacy experiment, which is based off of a experiment run out of the US, featured in, I think it was the New York Times. But basically, it's a bunch of scientists wanted to see, can you make people fall in love? And can they do it in, an hour or 2 hours, right? And by in love, we're talking about that intense feeling of adrenaline that releases, because being in love, right, is basically being high, by the way. So when we in love with somebody, we feel that intense, like our brain actually releases a whole bunch of chemicals.
Yeah.
Whole bunch of chemicals. And that's where we're like, I'm in love, but we can't see anything. We don't see the differences, right? We're like, love, because we're actually quite high. But they wanted to see if and so it's called, I call it the intimacy experiment. So you go away and you, with that partner, and you spend probably about an hour answering about 4 or 5 sets of questions. And each set, right, you talked about how much do you reveal. So the first set of questions, if you could invite anybody to dinner, who would it be? Like they're interesting. They're just beyond what's your favorite color, right? But not too far beyond that. And the second set, right, is a little bit more intimate, a little bit more vulnerable, a little bit more inquiring. And the third and the fourth set. And by the time you get to the last set, it's starting to get into what was your childhood like?
Yeah.
What was your biggest regret in life, right? And then at the very end, what you do after you've shared that with that person, and you both, like, you answer the question, then I answer the question, because intimacy is about mutual exchange, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it can't just be one person who's answering the questions. Like there's got to be that mutuality, or one person's just exposing themselves and the other person isn't. By the time you get to the end of answering all these questions, the experiment asks you to sit and look into each other's eyes, not a staring contest, but look into each other's eyes for 4 whole minutes.
Wow. That's a long time.
And the bond that comes from doing that experiment induces that intense connection that we experience when we're falling in love.
Wow.
And it's, really amazing. And the women that have been on this retreats that have done that, their partner, who I always, because I'm mean, right? I always say, oh, find somebody in the room that you don't know. Because I'm like, you're not cheating, right? Like you're not coming, not with the person you drove up with, that you're rooming with, that you've known for 10 years, right? Like, wind up, having this intimate bond that lasts them for retreats and retreats and retreats and years, because you've connected with somebody. Yeah. There was no kissing, there's no touching. I didn't say you have to go make out or have sex, not even in the equation.
And that's the difference, isn't it? Intimacy, and I'm guilty of it. Intimacy, it involves sex. I mean, I don't believe that now, but it's something that I did believe. When into me you see, into me you see.
You see, exactly.
Yeah.
And again, for women, because of the way we're socialized, sex is probably, we've been taught that that's the most vulnerable we can be. Mm. The most exposed, the most vulnerable, let alone, like I said, add some horrific sexual experiences, right? Sexual assault, rape, transactional sex, molestation, any of that stuff.
Yeah.
But every girl's kind of like, well, this is the most vulnerable. So we also, the difference between men and women is that we link sex to being incredibly vulnerable and therefore incredible intimacy. but men aren't necessarily socialized or taught the same things.
No, absolutely not. And that's not their fault. That doesn't make them
No.
wrong. Like,
I mean, the only way we can change that is by starting to raise our own kids differently.
I do with Oscar. Not
You
choice.
know, and it's a scary thing. Like I had a baby almost a year and a half ago now, a little girl.
How is she?
Oh, she's fabulous, cheeky monkey, absolutely. But I mean, what Mark and I talk sometimes, and especially for him to understand, like the horrors of what it's like to be a woman in this world, that our daughter is most likely going to experience sexual assault, like 9 out of 10 at some point in her life, and walk down the street and be afraid that she might die.
Be harassed and
have to, like all of that is it's a really unfortunate thing. And this is a very general thing, and it's not the kindest thing, but there is something to it. Like one of most men's greatest fears is that they will be that, a woman's going to laugh at them. Right. And one of women's greatest fears is that some man's going to kill them. What a fucked up world we live in that way.
Yeah.
That how different those two, like, worst case scenarios are.
No,
that's a whole nother conversation.
It's a whole nother podcast. We'll definitely have to get you in that one. Like, you set yourself up there hugely.
It's like, so so I'm always worried, like, how am I going to raise her to have that self-worth and that confidence that it took me so many years and so much work on myself and to get to that point. Like, I prefer for her to not have to wait until she's in her 30s and beyond to have that kind of power.
Because we're not the only ones putting the input in, though, are we? Because it's the society dynamic of how, outside of the family at home that we're taught as young women or young boys, and the messages that we're fed as young women and young boys that we take on. So we're really, and I don't want to say this, but it feels like we're fighting a losing battle, Yeah.
I mean, listen, like I said, I have a little girl, and if she's not wearing pink, and she rarely ever wears pink, by the way, because it's, I'll dress her in boy stuff. I don't care if it's cute, she's wearing it, like if it's on sale, even better. But even if I have her in, like, she's been in like pale yellow and she gets misgendered all the time. Yeah. And then somebody will be like, oh, it's because of her hair. I'm like, well, she's a baby, so she's not going to have a lot of hair. Like most of them don't. So I don't think that's it. We don't realize how indoctrinated we are.
Definitely.
Let alone if she's sitting somewhere, she could, and playing with a truck or a car instead of pushing a stroller.
Yeah, and also when we have other people comment like with little boys, oh, isn't he clever? Isn't he strong? And little girls, isn't she pretty? I've been guilty of it.
Yeah,
I've been guilty.
Yeah.
And
aren't you a good girl?
Yeah, aren't you a good girl? Isn't he strong, clever boy? Isn't she pretty? And the language that we use, and as I said, I've been guilty of it.
Yeah.
When they're small tots.
Yeah. We all, I mean, it's again, it's like part of the fabric of our lives at this point, what words we associate. And so, like, I'm always constantly, like, I tell Margot she's beautiful, but I also make sure I tell her she's brave, and clever and smart. And, then sometimes I try to convince her she's tired, so she takes a nap, but that doesn't work as well.
No, tired, you're hungry, you need to eat your vegetables. Mindful, absolutely mindful. But I think we can slowly start changing what we're doing.
Yeah.
I think
it is changing. It's just, if anybody's listening to this podcast and you're, I don't care if you're in your 20s, let alone your 30s or your 40s or beyond, like we're dealing with, and that's where I say, like, I wish it wasn't true. But the reality is what the reality is. And the reality is that if you, are there stories of people meeting and having some, we met, we were drunk, we had, had sex, and now we've been married and have 2 kids. Are there stories like that? Absolutely. But for every one story you hear that drunken one night stand or non-drunken one night stand that turned into, right, something amazing, there's at least 10,000 that didn't. So, I say, wait, have fun, get to know somebody.
Yeah, I like that.
And that's all I try to encourage. It's like, this is supposed to be fun. Like it doesn't feel like that anymore. And you've talked to people like, oh God, you know, they say things like, oh, dating is just so hard. I mean, I haven't been dating in years, but it's just the worst now. And it's like, we just have this preconceived notion, or experiences have helped inform them. And it's like, but it's supposed to be fun. Like, it's just that first date or the first time you meet up somebody. It's just, the whole intention is, I just want to get to know this little person and have a good time.
Yes, like, you know, like when you go and you go somewhere and you connect with people and you make friends with them, that's really fun. But I've
Absolutely.
had the same, I've said the same thing. Oh, it's so hard out there. I've been on 3 dates. Yes.
So hard out there.
So hard out there. Like, it's a minefield. I've been on 3 dates. Oh, really nice dates. You know, like, so you're right.
And you know, as an empowerment coach, our language matters.
Yes, of course.
So it's like, we, you know, when we use language like that, it's already coloring our experience.
Absolutely. I'm the worst one for it in my own life. And if I had someone a client come up, it certainly isn't something that I'd be pulling them up on. You know, why are you using this language? This is like you said, meant to be fun, but it's different when you try and take your own spoon of medicine, isn't it?
Yeah. So, you know, it's great to, and absolutely have an intention. Like, I'm dating, but my intent is, I want to find meaningful, long-term, committed, gorgeous, beautiful, loving relationship. Absolutely keep that, you know, but those first couple times you meet up with somebody, it's just about, can we have a laugh? Like, can we have some fun? The same way, like, if we were going to meet up, you know, and I say, hey, Liz, come in, you know, let's go into London, let's go to a show, right? Like, you wouldn't have this whole other agenda in your head.
No, I'd be like, sweet, when am I coming?
Yeah, right. We'd be like, oh, great. Well, what can, and we would say, like, what's something fun we could do?
Yeah.
Why aren't we doing that with dating?
Make it
so. Like, I also encourage people, like, I keep using the word coffee date, but by all means, please diverge from that.
Yeah.
Like, I've encouraged people to do. I've had clients have done. They meet somebody at the driving range and they just drive golf balls for a while and chat. Go for walks, go for, I don't, you know, when I say go for a walk, please, by all means, in a public, well-lit, day-lit place, you know, like, safety first, ladies, safety first, but like, to do something that's even activity-based, you know, than just sitting across a table, because that kind of turns it into that interview feeling. Is, I'm here, my cup of coffee, you're there, you know, is to find, go to in New York, my favorite first date place was called Fat Cat, and it was in the West Village. It was a jazz club, and it was deep in the basement, but it was also this huge games room. So there were pool tables, and there were ping pong tables and foosball tables, and they had a jazz, and there was couches, and it was like my go-to spot, because you're able to just have some physicality of movement.
Yes.
Instead of just sitting as well. There's some, you know, there's some music going on, but not so loud that you can't talk. You just have a bit of fun together.
I like that. You know, taking the regimen.
Playful.
Yes, I like that.
You know, so finding, you know, those little spots. And, you know, it's not like the internet is still anonymous enough that if you have the same first date place, it's not like all the guys are talking about it. Should take you to that? Oh yeah, she took you to that place too. Nobody will know. It's like that video, right? They'll know. Nobody will know.
Yeah. But the whole dating app thing is I'm not sure how I feel about it. I mean, I've been on one, and came off. I think I've blocked more men than actually spoke to. But yeah, you know, how somebody, you know, reaching for the same vegetable pie at the market, you know,
it's you know, unfortunately what online dating has done is and especially certain apps, it's like internet trolls, right? So now that we have this level of anonymity that I can log on and I can comment and I can make up a name and I can comment horrible things on articles, like the worst of people have come out because of that.
Yeah.
You know, and the same thing with online dating, and there are some interesting apps that try to find ways to get around that. So like, I think it's Hinge is a dating app that's based on friends of friends of friends of friends. So you connect your social media profiles and they're really connecting you with people that have second or third degree. So there isn't that complete anonymity. Like, you know, somebody they know, which kind of creates a little bit of accountability.
And what was that? What was that?
Hinge. It's called Hinge.
Hinge, okay.
So it hinges on, right? Like that you have some friends in common. Happen is about people that you cross paths with geographically. So you're more likely, like if you go to the same coffee shop, you know, you're going to be matched with people that also go to that same coffee shop. So in a way, it's kind of like that makes some people uncomfortable, but what it's trying to do is it's not like you can be a complete asshole and never see this person again, because, you know, you live in the same neighborhoods, you probably will bump into them. So you better act right.
So there's accountability. There's
Exactly. Exactly. A little bit of accountability. And that's why
Yeah.
a lot of these new ones also ask you to hook up your social media, in part to try to make sure there's, you know, cut down on any type of catfishing, which is very rare, I have to say. But also it's about that accountability.
Yeah, I like
You're not
that.
just some, you know, rando that you can, does that stop people from doing and saying horrific things on online dating? No.
No.
I mean, you ever want to see how fragile the male ego is, tell somebody you're not interested in them on online dating. And the visceral that you can get from some of these people is just like, wow, you don't take rejection well, do you? And it's such a low level rejection. It's like somebody you haven't even met yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hence, I've got more men than I actually spoke to, you know, like actually got into a conversation with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and you get somebody who sends back a message that's, you know, oh, you're just a 7 anyways, you're trashy. It's like, well, I just said I didn't want to, all I said was no, thank you.
Yeah. And being called a slut. And I'm like, thank you.
Yeah, it's like,
I've
never
never
even met, there's no investment here. Like, geez, you know. But yeah, so
wow.
anyhow.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It is in 5 to 11, and I have thoroughly enjoyed spending this hour with you.
It's been a blast.
And feel really blessed that you're my first guest. I am just going to do something, quickly check on Facebook, because we are live on Facebook and people can comment. I don't know whether they would have, but I can't see because I haven't got my glasses.
So Liz, what is the name of your podcast if I was looking for it on Spotify?
Thank you for that.
Because I was actually looking for it and I couldn't find you.
No, you're not going to find me until probably later on this afternoon. So at the moment, it's just a podcast with Liz and Wonderful Humans, because I've been trying to brainstorm actually, because this came, when I first started doing this, it came out of an ego. I was asked to do it by Crossroads Podcast UK off of an interview I'd done with somebody else. When they asked me, I was like, of course. You know, it was no real planning behind it completely, because I was like, well, of course, little me. But then it grew, and I was kind of like,
yes, this is ego calling. Of course, I'll do it.
Of course. And then thinking, like, yeah, well, of course. So, but then when I did it, I thought, okay, what is this about? What is my intention? And kind of what grew from that is the intention of, you know, us in this recovery community, we have this massive pool of amazing humans, hence the title Amazing, well, Wonderful Humans it is now. And we get the real privilege of freely having their advice, their knowledge, their value. And I thought, if we could put that for normal muggles, normal bods, and I apologise, that is not a derogatory term, I mean that with love to people that aren't in the recovery community, and it changed just one person's life or got them thinking, or they switched something up, how beautiful is that?
Yeah.
So the
podcast, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here. Search for Podcast with Liz, Wonderful Humans, tomorrow or later on this evening, depending on procrastination, and you'll find Liz's new podcast. And again, that's Podcast with Liz.
Oh, I love you. Thank you. No, look, I'm really.
So I looked for Crossroads, and it was just I kept seeing this one dude over and over again. I'm like, that's not Liz. That's definitely not Liz.
No, not me. No. Which is why I thought, you know, let's get a bit of autonomy. Let's, you know, make it mine. So this is the first show and it's just mine. And as I said, I've got the beauty.
I get to be your first guest.
Yeah, you have. I'm so pleased. Like, and just that it went without any glitches, and that I'm going to be able to, if anybody asks for podcast link, I'm going to be able to fire it off to them. Whereas before it was like a bit itchy. So yeah. So the name might change, and if it does, you know, when you were blowing me up then, I went all hot and like, oh, hide me. And the name might change, but at the moment it is just like chatting with me with Wonderful Humans. Simple.
Nice. I love it.
So thank you.
All right, my darling. Well, thanks for having me. It's been a great honor and privilege to be your very first guest.
And I am going to definitely get you on, because there was lots of little topics that we could have a whole nother podcast with.
Yeah. So, listen, it's been really fun.
Thank you so much, and stay cool and have a blessed.
I will. Bye, guys.
Bye.